Hello, Ms. Pineda.
Hello, Mr. Andrade.
Thank you so much for letting me come into the classroom today. So tell me a little bit about how the lesson went during the time that I was in the classroom.
The kids came out really strong. They were really focused, so that was awesome. That's one thing that I feel helps move a lesson along is the kids, if they are focused. I'm able to focus teaching it, and what I noticed in my other class, they were off task, and it was throwing me off too, constantly having to correct behavior. So the Bulldogs, that's when you came in, they were really into the lesson, they were quiet, and they were working really hard.
Okay. And that quiet, like focused behavior, did you do anything specific to prepare for that? What are some of the things that lead to that kind of classroom? I agree. I saw a lot of focused behavior as well. If we're calling focused behavior quiet behavior, that's what I saw. I mean, the kids were on task, writing down, following you in the instruction. They were following the classroom procedures really well. So what do you think led to that?
I think since we had 2 days off, they were excited to get to the math. And then what I also learned is when they have a task to do, they want to do it. If you don't give them anything to do, that's when they start talking. And because like during our free time during testing, they weren't allowed to use computers or anything after testing. They just had to do work, and kids that weren't interested in the work that they had to do, they would start talking to their neighbors. So I noticed that these kids actually really do like math, and they're excited to learn and learn new content. So even I have students that are maybe a little bit higher than other students. They say like, yeah, sometimes you teach us things that we never learned. So even though I am a high student, I still like to learn new things and little tricks that you're teaching us and stuff. So
that's good.
That makes me happy.
So I think you mentioned two really important pieces there. Number one, the structure, and with that structure, I agree. Having something for the kids to manipulate in real time, I think is very important. The other thing that I noticed on the wall, you had the timer, and that you used that timer very, very effectively. And our kids seem to respond really well to that kind of structure. I see kids doing this a lot, gauging how much time they need for the task that they're given. And if those things are directed, I think you have a much better chance of the kids getting on task. So I agree with that. The other piece is that individualized piece that comes along with monitoring in the classroom. When the kids think that because of the teacher's belief that I can hit this level, then that in and of itself is a high expectation for kids, and so they're much, they get excited, like you're saying, like they're excited about the math. That's great. So tell me what the standard was for learning today.
Today, our standard is 7.RP.A.2, which is our lesson was on identifying proportional and non-proportional relationships and graphs. And do you want me to read the?
The standard I think is important to understand, because the objective, what I'm leaning towards is what do you think your kids' understanding of the objective was, and how did you lead them to that objective?
So at first, what I always tell them is that it sounds like really big words, and it might seem a little overwhelming, but by the time we get to the end of our lesson, the objective will make more sense. And then I always try and take the big words and break them down to smaller words. So for example, proportional. I said that means if something could be constant, and then they still didn't understand that, and you helped with, when you were talking to Daniel, he said it means same pattern. So then from there, I realized I have to think of a word that a kid will remember. So kids know same, and kids know what a pattern is. So in my class now, we use proportional and same pattern. So if something is proportional, we know it has the same pattern. So when I read an outcome, I'll try substituting the big words or I'll say the big word and then I'll say what it means. You know, proportional means same pattern. And then I'll try and tell them, like, don't be scared if you see a word you don't know or you don't remember what it means. We're gonna break that down, and by the end, it should all come together, and you're gonna say, oh, I get what it means now. So I try and tell them that sometimes math uses big words, but really the kids are capable of still doing the math, even though it sounds big and scary, because at the end, it's all gonna make sense.
Right. And so I agree that sometimes the objectives are daunting like that, and I like the way you're scaffolding the language to say that this word, proportion, means a continuing pattern. But, you know, that it's also very important that we can connect that academic language all the time. And so I like the way you're giving the kids an alternative, like word, like you're saying, a kid-friendly, but always being able to connect it back to the academic language. That way we kind of like gradually like get them to use the word proportional.
Yes.
And I think Adrian,
Yeah.
you know, really did that today.
Yeah.
He's like, no, and he was playing with that thing. He's like, they're not proportional. And then, so I want to get into that piece of the lesson now. How, if you had to pick a percentage, what percentage of the kids do you think understood? Not I would say understood. What percentage of the kids understood the lesson or got to a level of understanding that you were happy with?
I don't think it was in my class.
Because I think that the graphing of the relationship, I think the goal of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the goal of the graphing of the relationship is to tell whether or not a relationship is proportional.
Correct.
And there were some qualifiers there. So what percentage of the kids got that concept?
With that class? Ooh, I'd say pretty high. Like maybe, I don't know if I'm guessing too high. I want to say 85 or 90%.
85 or 90%?
Yeah.
So how do you know that?
Well, it would be through their exit ticket, but also when I would ask questions, like we were doing a problem, and then it would say, how do you know, for this one, A, problem set, how do you know that they had to do this on their own? And then after we brought it all back and we were going to go over it, and then I would say, okay, who knows the answer to A, you know, if it's proportional, and it was proportional, and then you had to write why. So the reasons why it would be proportional is because it's on a line that passes through the origin, and then a lot of the class was raising their hand. So that showed me that they understood the material and were confident enough to answer the question.
Okay, I appreciate that explanation, because when I was in the classroom, I could say that I didn't know what the percentage was.
Yeah, we didn't get to, unfortunately, the independent work by that time.
Exactly. And so I appreciate that explanation, and I would love to see the exit tickets. When the time frame that I was in the classroom, I thought that there were like a lot of opportunities for the teacher to get a sense of where the kids were and maybe slow down or speed up the instruction. Is there a time that you can remember when it was kind of the feeling in the classroom was like, if I got to a place where I could see what percentage of kids understood, maybe I could pull them along a little faster?
Yeah, I mean, when I was doing the examples, it's hard, when I do like the I do or we do, it's hard to gauge where the kids are. But if there was an opportunity for me to see who was grasping the concept and not, then I think that would help, because then I can also do like small group work, pull kids to the back, and things like that. But normally in my class, and because it's my first year teaching and I probably am still, you know, I'm definitely learning, I don't know where kids are until we get to when we start the independent practice.
Great.
Because then I get hands raised, or I do a check for understanding, and everyone that is lost, I pull them over to the side. So.
And so what we can do is work on some, you know, some techniques, like best practices that will help you, you know, gauge whether or not the kids are where you are, so you can move ahead quicker. Because one of the things that the kids tell me in those focus groups that we did at the beginning of the year is like, yeah, we get it, let's go, let's move on. And I kind of felt that a little bit today. So in the piece where the kids had to, that you were asking the kids to graph with you,
Mhm.
I felt like that would be a great opportunity to get in groups of 3 or something like that, and
Okay.
not only ask the kids to complete that task, but to explain their thinking. Because you use the example of the airplane and then going up,
Mhm.
and that's a great example for kid-friendly language,
Mhm.
but understanding that the relationship is a variable as compared to another variable, and what that looks like linearly, for a
Mhm.
kid to be able to explain that would give me a better sense of can they do it, you know, with the exit ticket. And so my check for understanding should match my exit ticket,
Okay.
which should match the objective, which is
Mhm.
very strong right now in your class, I think.
Mhm.
That thing what you did with the exit ticket, showing them at the end this is what you're going to do, that was very powerful, and I appreciate that because we talked about it yesterday. And so
Yeah, and every piece of advice or, you know, coaching that you give me, I'm gonna try it. Like I said, it's my first year, so I never knew that you were supposed to show the exit ticket. Like I said, the classes I pushed in last year is like secretive, top secret. You can't see this exit ticket. So then you're like, oh, it makes sense, you know, you have to show what you want the end goal to look like. So when I showed them, this is what the exit ticket's gonna look like, this is how it's gonna line up to the objective, and that's what we're working towards. So I really like doing that, and I continue to do that throughout my class.
yeah, I appreciate that. So what do you think is the benefit from the kids working together in terms of what our goal is for the math department this year?
Like small group work?
Yeah. What do you think like the benefit of the kids working together is?
Them being able, like you said, to explain their thinking.
Yeah.
Like, what does this mean to me, and how can I solve this?
Yeah. Because a lot of the work that we're doing, that when we did the measurement of the standards or the dissecting of the standards, it was, remember, a lot of it was conceptual.
Mhm.
And so we can get the kids to explain their concepts, then I think that they'll be much more successful in those assessments.
Okay.
So give me one thing that you're gonna think about as you start planning for, you know, the next lessons, because I appreciate it. You're so receptive to advice in real time. A couple of times I've stopped you in the middle of the lesson and you just go with it, and that's awesome. What from this exchange do you think that is going to be beneficial to your planning?
I definitely know that I probably do hold their hand maybe a little too much. So what I was trying to do is make sure they understand the concept before I let them do it on their own. But like you said, graphing, next time maybe I can put the cognitive load on them and let them graph it themselves in pairs, and then I can circulate like that and see who is grasping it. So I think what I'm going to take is letting them break away into small groups sooner rather than later.
I would agree with that. I'd love to come and see it.
Okay. And I'm going to let everybody know.
Of course. Well, thank you very much for your time today in
Thanks
this
for
coaching
observing
session.
me and
I will
helping
see
me.
you on Monday for your
Alright.
observation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pineda.